salt of the earth to me is levity. We, as covenant makers and keepers, are the salt of the earth. We need to flavor our interactions and flavor society. Why? Because it draws attention to the Savior.
Welcome back to For All the Saints. It's good to have you all here today, listening in and watch it, hopefully. I'm so pleased to have Scott Christopher on the podcast today. And Scott, thank you for coming on.
Hey, Benjamin, what do I call you?
Just Ben is fine.
Okay, Ben. All right. Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm always happy to do these. I have nothing else to do, literally, except sit around. And what I wished was actually my house.
Is that not your actual background?
No.
I should do that. I need to do that. Look at this background. It's rubbish.
Yeah. This is my background is pure green screen. I'm actually in my bedroom at home. My desk and my little office is kind of in the bedroom. My wife is not happy about that at all, but it's been this way for years. And we have now we're empty nesters. We have all these bedrooms downstairs that could be used as an office, but the Wi-Fi router is right there. And right. So I want to be as close to it as possible. So,
and you are doing something at the moment, though. You're doing turkeys across America, which I'm keenly following. You'll be pleased to know. I've been watching it. What are you doing that for? And turkey isn't a phrase that I think we're familiar with in the UK.
Well, okay, so a turkey, yes, is a bowling term for getting 3 strikes in a row.
Oh.
Yes. And so I just got back, actually, from my Turkeys Across America tour, which was essentially me feeling restless and wanting to get out. I love to drive around America. I just find it so fascinating. It's so big and vast and diverse. And my wife hates long road trips. So we have family in Nashville, Tennessee, my son and his children and his wife. So she flew to Nashville and I drove. And since I have time, I thought, I'm not going to hurry there. So everywhere I go, I stop at a bowling alley and I bowl one game. And if in that one game I can get a turkey, then I donate a turkey meal for this year's coming holidays to a charity here in Salt Lake City. And it used to be pretty easy for me. Like you could almost guarantee I'm going to, but I'm older now. I'm not as good. So I've adapted it. I've adapted the goal so that I can actually help people instead of just having fun. So I went out to Tennessee and then I drove back, and I just got back a couple of days ago, and I still have a few episodes that I have to post, but the Turkeys Across America is over and it was mildly successful. There'll be a handful of families that will enjoy a turkey dinner.
Oh, that's good. That's the main thing. How long is that drive to Nashville for you?
Yeah, so it's about 1,600 miles one way, which, is kind of like driving from, where did I stay down at the very south end of Southampton, maybe? I don't know, up to wherever you are, York or Leeds or somewhere around there. Yeah, but like 7 times up and back, or whatever.
I was going to say, I was just speaking to my friend who is going from Dorset, which is right at the south, up to Edinburgh to go fishing, and he was talking about it's perhaps the longest drive he's ever done and sort of planning it out. And I said to another guest I had the other week that long drives are a huge deal for us in the UK. We plan them like a year in advance. They're like a big vacation. And in America, you're driving like 4 hours to the grocery store or something.
No, yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I just get in the car and go. There's no planning except especially this trip. Normally, I know that I could take either I-70 or I-80, which are kind of like your M1s, and all the way to, to St. Louis, and then from there down to Missouri, other parts, and then over to Nashville, through Memphis, blah, blah, blah. This time, I just started driving and kind of went, let's go on smaller highways and slower roads. Let's drive as if we were in Britain, basically, which, yeah, you go 50 miles in the UK and it takes you 3 hours with traffic and all the roundabouts, and the roadways are this narrow. You're lucky if you can find an actual freeway or expressway. So it took me 3.5 days to get there, to get out there. And then on the way back, I didn't stop as much. 1,600 miles back. In fact, my last day of driving, I woke up in Topeka, Kansas, and drove straight from Topeka to Salt Lake City, which was about 1,100 miles. It was about 14 hours of driving.
I went to Nashville, I was fortunate enough to do some work in Nashville. I was on my own. When was it? It was last April, I think. And it was one of the best places I've ever visited. And I came back and told my wife, we have to go to Nashville. I would move there in a heartbeat.
Oh, dude.
It was incredible.
Listen, don't even say those kind of things. My son lives in Hendersonville, which is a suburb, a very beautiful, great suburb of Nashville. And every time we go to visit them, we say the exact same thing, which is, in fact, the last time we were there, we were looking at houses, and pricing them out. Right now, the market's kind of crazy, so we can't do anything right now because our house has to sell first, and the market's tough with interest rates really high. But believe me, it's a very livable city. It's very livable.
And that I had possibly the best meal I've ever had there in my life. It was Martin's Barbecue. If you know that place, and I had this in England. We don't get brisket like you guys have brisket, and so when I went over there, I was like, I'm gonna get some proper brisket, and I had a brisket burger from Martin's, and it was divine. And yeah, I think of it actually more often than I perhaps should, but anyway, I have some things I want to talk to you about. I'm not just bringing you here for a chat. So anyway, I wanted to first, so I instantly recognize you from the classics like The Best 2 Years, Mobsters and Mormons, movies like that. They were actually a really influential part of my growing up.
Huh. Happy to hear that. I haven't heard them termed as classics. That does kind of make me feel old, but I do appreciate the intent.
To us, they are in the UK. They sort of managed to, not all of those sort of Latter-day Saint filmmakers and the films that they made, especially the more humorous ones, not all of them managed to come over, but there's this select group that have just are sort of iconic and have a cult following over here. And I wonder, what was it like being in that sort of, I mean, for us, that was the golden age of, we would go to the Latter-day Saint bookstore and get these new comedy films and these new, obviously The Best 2 Years is sort of a comedy, but it's also quite a drama as well. What was it like to be in those films?
Oh, just a riot, a lot of fun. Obviously, Best 2 Years, we shot primarily, well, you shouldn't say that. We shot all of the exteriors in Holland. But so we were there for 2 weeks, and everything that's outside, I think the only interiors we had were those few instances where the elders are, knocking doors or getting in and trying to sit down by the girl. Those were in actual Dutch members' houses. Everyone that's in it is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I mean, the random people on the street, the background aren't. They don't even know they're in the movie, of course. But everyone that has anything, and there's very few people. But everyone that's in it were Latter-day Saints, and so we shot everything there outside, and then everything inside is pretty much in their apartment, which was a home in Alpine, Utah, that they just kind of reconfigured to make it look like an apartment. And then the other interior was at the grocery store where Elder Rogers, or Elder whatever, the hick, Kirby, I don't even know his name. What? Calhoun.
Elder Calhoun.
Elder Calhoun. Yeah, that's one. And I gave him a Book of Mormon right there in the grocery store. That store was obviously Dutch. In fact, we went to it, and the director, Scott Anderson, I don't think he'd even had any previous. I don't know if he may have just asked them right then, is it okay if we just shoot a quick scene in your store? And so myself and Kirby and the DP, I can't even think of his name now. It's been so long. He's so good. But anyway,
David Nibley is
the cameraman. I can't think of.
Right.
Oh my gosh, he's huge in LDS.
I thought when you said DP, you meant district president.
Oh, that's funny. No, I meant the director of photography. Yeah. Oh gosh, it's killing me. Anyway, so the three of us and Scott Anderson, we all kind of go into this little mart, and we block out where we're going to go, and the idea is we're going to shoot this whole thing in just one take, so that we're in and out of this store quickly. So Kirby and I are kind of working on what we're going to say and our lines and stuff, and we'll walk over here, then we'll walk over here, and then we'll come here and we'll walk around there, and then DP he says, I'll bring my camera this way if you guys go that way. And meanwhile, the Dutch store owner is just sort of keeping his eye on us, like, what is he doing? And so Rogers and Calhoun have their little moment there where they're talking, and he takes the notebook, and then Rogers goes off. So that's when kind of the one shot starts, with Kirby coming around, and there I am, and oh, give me that thing, and oh, Elmer, blah, blah, blah. And what was kind of fun is, as we come around the corner, and I told them the things that I'd be grabbing so they knew where I'd be stopping, is I said right before we shot it, when we were rehearsing, and I told Kirby, I said, I'm going to grab a bottle of wine, and I'm going to look away for a second, and you put it back on the shelf. And to me, that's like the funniest little moment, because it was timed so perfectly. Clink, clink, and he just puts it right back in the thing. But anyway, so
I love that bit.
Those working with those actors. I was the oldest of the cast, of course. I was, I think, 36, and they were all in their low 20s. I think Kirby might have been the youngest, or maybe actually, I think Casey, who plays Rogers, was the youngest. He'd only been off his own mission maybe a year or year and a half when we shot it.
Oh, right.
And Kirby was probably 24. Nibley was about 30, and Cameron was maybe 25 or 26. But yeah, we were. I originally read for the part of one of the missionaries, because even though I was 36, I still looked pretty missionary-ish. But ultimately, they said, "No, we kind of like what you're doing with Kyle." And I said, "Great, whatever. Let's just go to Holland. What do I care?"
And those films, especially that one, has become so beloved to us. And it is I love watching it back. And it was the thing I remember when me and my wife went to Amsterdam, and we just kept thinking, oh, well, the best 2 years. And I remember when I was young, stroop waffles were like this magical thing because of the film. And I finally had one. I was like, oh, yeah, that is really good.
Did you try the fish? The raw fish?
I looked, I was going to, and I didn't. It didn't appeal to me. Did you have some while you were there?
Oh, heavens, no. No. I was strictly burgers and pizza all the way. I mean, I was just like, there's nothing here that interests me from a culinary perspective. I did like some of the little, the Danish, the pastries and things, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
I had a lot of time to myself there because they were off doing a lot of shooting. I only have a few scenes in Holland. And so I spent a lot of time hitting the rails. I went down to Rotterdam and Delft, and I'd take a bike from the hotel and go riding around the town. And because we stayed outside of it. We stayed in Haarlem, which was where pretty much everything was shot. But, the thing that made that movie for me was the music. It really, we saw a version of it before Michael McLean and others had scored it. And it was like, it's cute. It's all right. It's a little over the top, I mean, it's kind of stagey, blah, blah, blah. But then when they added those songs, I mean, that's what sticks with you. That's what makes those moments when Rogers is just sitting on the train going home. Those songs that are playing. And the Mama has the best fried chicken, whatever. That song is just so perfect about Calhoun's character. And the music really can make or break a film, I think.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, that soundtrack is particularly so good.
Oh,
It really elevates it all. And for you, is it cool being a Latter-day Saint and being able to sort of relive that conversion experience that Kyle had?
Yeah, for sure. And it wasn't hard to do because when we were rehearsing the scene, I asked Scott Anderson, I said, do you want me to have some tears here? Am I touched to that extent? And he said, can you? And I said, well, of course, if it feels right. And so, so we basically, we let the cameras roll so that they can kind of teach the lesson. And, the spirit was there enough that now, obviously I've felt the spirit a lot and I don't always cry. But I can, as Kyle, it wasn't that hard to just kind of put myself into that situation and have a little bit of, I mean, it was not, they weren't saline drops, it was like, this is real, it was kind of fun. So, and then Casey, of course, also was kind of teary eyed, and it was a very special little scene to shoot.
I love how it was done too, and that it felt so authentic to us because, with a film like that, when you've got all the kit there and you've flown everyone out to Holland, you'd think like, oh, we need to have this big, grand sort of Joseph Smith restored the gospel, but it really wasn't. It was so down to earth, and you felt watching it like you were in that home with you both, and I think that's what was so special about it to me.
That's cool. That's a good perspective. I think that it was the thing that you didn't even mention, which I love, is that it was also laced with humor. I mean, the whole part of, Rogers or Calhoun sitting there messing up the laminates or the flip charts and, a pamphlet, finally the moment is broken with a laugh. I know that Joseph Smith was a pamphlet. I mean, it's like some people come away and through the years in the past, it's been 20 years since we shot it. So it's been about 19 since it's been out. But, people will totally say that movie made me want to go on a mission. That helped convert me. And that's the most gratifying of all. Now, I didn't play one of the missionaries, I was just the investigator, but it's nice to be part of that because people associate me in a project that I did as being a big part of their lives, of their spiritual lives. I went on a mission because of Best 2 Years. Really? Yeah, we saw it. We watched it every Sunday after church. We thought if that's how missions are, then that looks pretty good. And it was because there was a lot of reality to it. The reality is Rogers. Will he or won't he? Is he going to go home early? Is he going to beat up Johnson? What's going to happen? We don't know. I mean, it's kind of the reality, but also the reality is these are young men who work hard and the Spirit attends them and it changes people. And that gets kids excited. They might not even know why, but they go, I just love this, you know? And it's like, yeah, that's the spirit of mission work. It's pretty, I was just at a baptism last night for a young Latino family here in Salt Lake City. My wife and I serve in a Spanish-speaking ward as service missionaries. And, you know, I'm sitting there again in a baptism, just feeling the same. It's just so refreshing and cool and sweet, you know?
Yeah. And I as well, I used to listen to the soundtrack on my mission, and it would sort of pinpoint different emotions that I was having, as we all do as missionaries. And the humorous moments, I was teaching a family. I served my mission in Malaysia and Singapore.
Oh.
I was teaching a family, and I had to teach them in Malay. And although I was assigned as a Malay speaking elder, I didn't serve in a Malay speaking area, but we had an opportunity to teach a family the first vision in Malay. And so I thought, okay, I've got to do this now. And I remember saying to them, Aku melihat di atas kepalaku, which means I saw directly above my head, and kepalaku is head. And I said kalapaku, which means my coconut. And so I'm feeling it really strongly, and they're all laughing at me, saying,
it's more or less the same thing.
He saw directly above his coconut, a pillar of light. So, you know, we all relate to those things. And
yeah.
What's the current state of Latter-day Saint filmmaking like? Because I feel like, especially over in the UK, we don't hear about it as much as we used to.
Yeah, we don't really hear about it much either here as well. I wouldn't say it's dead, but it's sort of evolved in some ways to more faith-based filmmaking as opposed to specifically LDS filmmaking. That's definitely run its course. It was the golden era of what I would call Hollywood. You know, I coined that phrase. I was in a mockumentary called The Work and the Story.
It's one of my favorites, The Work and the Story.
Oh, you've seen it? Oh,
I've seen it loads of time. That was one of my.
I don't think I think I saw it once when it was done. It's been 20 years since I've even seen it. But yeah, I remember I was playing a critic, and I think I mentioned Hollywood, but yeah, it just sort of ran its course. Now the church still primarily is really the main one that's still producing church-related materials, but I'm trying to think if I know of anyone right now every now and then, probably one a year, there's somebody who does something, you know, semi-historical. I did a thing for Nauvoo, a guy that moved out to Nauvoo and bought up a bunch of property, an LDS guy, and he wanted to make kind of a movie about the history of Nauvoo, specifically with Joseph Smith, and where he might have been buried or something like that. I don't remember what it was. And I played Hiram. That was a couple summers ago in Nauvoo, and it was a lot of fun. But I just think most of the LDS filmmakers are finding their niche in more secular material, but that's family friendly, you know. And I think it's possible that there could be another wave of kind of Mormon cinema that should cycle back around, just because it's another generation of filmmakers that are adults now who go, hey, we could do something and maybe do it right, do it better than Hailstorm did or whatever.
I was just going to say about Hailstorm. You know, was it Kurt Hale? Was that his name? And he used to be behind a lot of these sort of lighter comedy ones. Is he packed up and not doing those anymore?
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing. I haven't talked to him or heard from him in 10 years or more. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, all the big names like Richard Dutcher, he had a couple of movies then, and there's still a company called Candlelight Pictures that I've done a bunch of movies with, and they're an LDS family that makes all, but they mostly focus on these romantic dramedies, and they shoot them all over the world. We were in Albania a couple of years ago, in Fiji or French Polynesia.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they're very formulaic for Hallmark, like Hallmark summer movies, so to speak. And I think they're just now kind of getting into the Christmas. I don't know if the Hallmark Christmas movie mania has made it over to the UK, but here in the States, people are watching Hallmark Christmas movies year round now. They make like 100 of them a year.
I struggled. My sister was really into all those Christmas films, and they were all you looked at the covers and she was choosing which one to watch, and every cover was the same. It stressed me out to no end. Is it different being on a Latter-day Saint film set to being on a normal one, or even just a Christian one? Do you experience significant differences in how it works and how it operates?
Yeah, no, not really. From a technical or professional standpoint, it's no different than a non-faith-based or even non-LDS set. The one thing that you do have, like with Best 2 Years, for example, I seem to recall that we would have a group prayer at the start of every day of shooting, which, you're not going to get anywhere, generally speaking. Even when I worked on a show called Granite Flats on BYU TV, which was primarily a lot of LDS people. Most of the cast were not LDS. I think I was the only LDS actor in the kind of the main cast. But I do like that. I like starting with prayer, everyone praying, even whether they're of our faith or another or no faith at all, they'll still shut their eyes and say amen, But it's interesting. I've worked on some other sets in Los Angeles that are, very much network television series. And I always expect to be, I don't know, like absorbed by the negativity or pummeled by language or people just, everyone's smoking and drinking and, and it's like, no, even in Hollywood, where it's kind of an armpit to begin with, most, film and TV sets, the people are just genuine, kind, courteous. You wouldn't tell the difference between this or a BYU TV set, except every now and then you'll hear an F-bomb or whatever from somebody who dropped a light, or something, or maybe you catch a guy having a cigarette break. But otherwise, there's a lot of similarities.
What do you think about we have in, what day is it today? In a couple of days, Sound of Freedom is premiering in the UK. But what do you think about what Angel Studios has done and the impact that Sound of Freedom seems to be having?
Well, that's a great question, Ben, and so relevant and timely because I haven't even seen it myself. I haven't had time. My wife and I are planning to go this week. We just got back from traveling. It has so much momentum right now. And I was talking to a young, a budding filmmaker just yesterday who wanted to kind of pick my brain. And so I Zoom called with him and I said, now might be the right time for someone who's kind of faith-based and to really start going after it because Sound of Freedom is crushing it. They have made more money in the U.S. than like the Indiana Jones sequel, and these other big summer blockbusters. Here comes this movie that, from what I can understand, really isn't all that far off from just a regular Hollywood movie. I mean, it's a great story. It's gripping. It's scary. It's dramatic. Jim Caviezel, of course, is a fantastic actor. I mean, it's right up there. But because it's being distributed Now, not even produced by Angel Studios, but just distributed by Angel Studios. And they're the ones who distribute The Chosen. Because of that, it sort of has this faith-based tag. And Jim Caviezel, of course, who played Jesus in The Passion of, or whatever that show was that he played the Savior. He's a huge Christian, very conservative. So it has this tag that it's a Christian movie, even though from what I've heard, it's just the story of Tim Ballard and the Operation Underground, the rescuing of sex slaves and children and all of that. But I think it's going to help pave the way for more of this kind of fare. In the United States right now, you do have a huge swelling, an upsurge of middle American Christians who are going to theaters and watching faith-based movies. They're good fictional narratives, or sometimes based on true stories, with name stars, but they're not afraid to talk about God in their movies. They're not afraid to have a character kneel and pray. They're not afraid to have them in church with a pastor reading scriptures. It's not shoved down your throat, but it's the thread that goes through the plot of the movie and the characters and their arc. And so that excites me because I want to do more of that work. In fact, if I could, I've even auditioned for and haven't been cast in any yet, but I've auditioned for a lot of Christian, quote unquote, Christian filmmakers from other places because they're busy, they're successful. Part of me is always cautious about making a living off of the gospel or off of peddling Christianity. That's hard for me. It's a little priestcrafty. I don't know. I'm kind of like, I don't charge usually, if I can help it, for almost anything I do that is in any way related to Christ. You know what I mean? Like, it's too easy. But I tend to ramble. Sound of Freedom, I'm excited for you guys to have it there. It's killing it worldwide. I love what Angel Studios is trying to be all about, especially with The Chosen doing as well as it is. I hope that they're successful enough that they can keep producing and distributing these types of works because the world needs it. And, I need it as an actor because I don't really want to do anything else.
It is, it's just that sort of normal yet radical, for some reason, feeling in Hollywood to see the protagonist be someone who's just sort of a normal family faith person. And we haven't seen that. And I think that's a theme across. I was listening to something where they were analyzing female characters in Marvel and in the new Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and saying how there's such an urge to promote femininity and to empower women that they're actually creating female characters that are completely unrelatable because all they're doing is making them more masculine than the men. And then you have characters who young girls and women of all ages can't relate to. And you have characters of men that men can't relate to and don't really want to.
Well, there's this idea of, and it's true, we all love the kind of the dopamine rush that escapism brings us, that takes us out of our regular everyday life and the concerns and the things. And so we go to the movies or we turn on the TV to kind of escape. And so the more fantastic it is and the more unrealistic it is, it's almost more refreshing because it couldn't possibly align with our day-to-day regular challenges. But having said that, I could not agree with you more without repeating what you've just said, rehashing it, or even adding on and piling on. I totally agree. I have my reservations about particularly the way women are being portrayed at and it's funny because just even someone like my wife, who happens to be a woman, she'll go, this is like, are we supposed to believe that 5'4", 95-pound woman really has just beaten up 6 huge men? and it's not even a sexist gender thing. It's just physics, you know. But not only that, it's not just are we supposed to buy that and believe it? It's like you say. I mean, it is an literally unattainable. I wouldn't even say ideal. It's an unattainable idea. And so for adults, we just kind of go, oh gosh, okay, give me a break. Is this moment over? Can we all go back to just being regular people, like you're saying, instead of all superheroes, whatever the gender, race, color, creed, faith? Can we just bring it in a little? But it's also, for the kids who go, I can do anything. I really, really can. No, you really, really can't. You cannot do anything. But you can do a lot of things. And with, proper understanding, you'll keep those things straight so that you're not trying to fly off the roof of the house or walk in a dark alley in the middle of the night unprotected because you've seen people go, hi-ya, and it scares everyone away, Yeah, I'm an old man now, Ben, so I...
But I also think when you look at these characters that we can sort of take from and that are more down to earth, they still become these sort of superheroes and do amazing things. But it comes from a place of faith or something greater than themselves that then inspires them to go on and do something marvelous. And it's like, well, why wouldn't we teach that and portray that? Because I think that's so much more extraordinary.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that's, in terms of like the superhero movies, at least the Marvel ones and Shazam, or whatever, there's a certain sense of humor that they have, kind of a, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. This is all just fun. You know what I mean? It's basically still, I still, at least the construct of good versus evil is still fairly clear in those kinds of films, which I think is overall the greatest takeaway. Because we as adults can sit and kind of pick apart all the different character flaws. And why would you, holy cow, you got to be kidding me. That could never happen. The plausibility of this or that, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, if the kids walk away relating to and aspiring to be like the good team, then that's a good takeaway.
Mm-hmm. And is it easy to maintain your integrity and the standards that you've got for yourself from your faith? Is it easy to keep those when you're in Hollywood and going into these sets and auditioning?
It gets easier. It gets easier as you commit to it more and more. It's interesting I say that because for me, it's almost gotten harder. Like it was almost easier as I correct myself mid-sentence. It was almost easier at the very beginning to just have that full-on integrity that I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. I don't want to be in this. I don't want to be in that. Because I was a young married man, a young father. I was a young bishopric member or whatever. And it was just, and it's funny, as I've gotten older, it has gotten harder. It's almost like I get tested more now that I'm, where I'm like, okay, so what's next? But interestingly, I haven't, I still don't believe I've crumbled or given in to anything that I said I would not do. There's been a few mistakes. There's been a few misunderstandings. You sometimes can't get around those. But there's the satisfaction and the unspeakable joy, as it were, that comes from turning something down based on my own principles and my own understanding of the covenants that I've made. That does kind of warm the cockles of my soul, where I feel like, I remember President Benson once saying to the proud, the applause rings in their ears, but to the humble, the applause in heaven warms their heart. And I remember I was in the MTC when he gave that talk. It was in 1986. And I just scribbled that down. I'm like, I just always want to be humble so that I get their applause, and it warms my heart rather than the echo and reverberation of worldly applause. I've never really cared about that, you know.
Right. I want to just ask you, because I'm desperate to get onto your books, especially one particular book about levity. And people who are listening to this who are coming because of that, what I said at the start about the films we recognize you in and the series we recognize you in, they may be less aware about your books, but I think they're brilliant, especially The Levity Effect. But before I get into that, I just want to hear a little bit, because my family's favorite TV show is Modern Family, and you had an experience where you were on that. And what was that? Was it weird going into such? I mean, you'll be on many of these very recognizable sets, but I'm picking out selfishly Modern Family. But is it strange when you go on to such a iconic, sort of recognizable set with these characters?
Definitely. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's one of those pinch me moments. Yeah. I grew up far from Hollywood in Michigan, and always wanted to be an actor, and always watched the TV shows, and thought someday I'm going to walk onto those big Hollywood lots, you know, with all the round domed, you know, sound stages. And so, yeah, I had an opportunity to audition for Modern Family, maybe in their fourth or fifth season. And I was called in to meet with Jeff Greenberg, I think is his name. He's the casting director who cast Frasier and Cheers and other classic shows. And I met with him, and I read for him, and he said, "Thank you very much." And this was at I think this was the Paramount lot in Hollywood. And so their sets were in all the different buildings right by me. And I said, "Is it okay if I look around?" He said, "Oh yeah, you're on the lot. Go explore." And I'd actually been to that lot about 10 years earlier with a buddy of mine. We got there for a party or something, and we stayed and we walked around, and we were like, "Oh, this is so cool." But we weren't able to get into any of the studio buildings. Well, this time they were all open. And so I went right in on the Modern Family set and walked through Mitchell and Cam's house, and the Dunphys, went up the squeaky stair, and just kind of took selfies of myself. The lights were kind of off, so it was kind of dark, and I'm taking pictures. And I didn't get the part, but it was nice to be there. Well, then about 2 years later, I was in South Carolina or somewhere. I was on the road giving a speech to some company. And my agent called, and she said, "Can you quickly audition for Modern Family?" I said, "Well, it's going to have to be on tape." And she said, "Yeah, I know." So in my hotel room, I did a little selfie audition, sent it in. They cast me. And so I was cast in an episode in season 7, I think. And now I go back to the place, and there's I saw Sophia coming out of her trailer. I think I said hello to her, and she was very nice, but I wasn't in a scene with her. I was in the scene with Julie Bowen and Ty Burrell, and was able to spend several hours, because, you know, you wait around a lot. And Julie and I got to talking. She plays Claire, and she has 4 sons. I have 5. And so she said, "Oh, you have 5 boys, and, you know, are you LDS?" "Yes, I am." And then I talked to Ty a little bit, and he has a home in Salt Lake City. He married a girl who went to the University of Utah. And so I think he owns a bar or something in downtown Salt Lake City. When I told him I'm from here, he said, "Oh, I live there." I said, "Yeah, I know. We all know, you know." But it was just really neat, because every time I'm on a show like that, where I'm meeting people like that for the first time that I recognize and I know from other things or from that show, is Julie, for example, was very, very down to earth, very cool. She knows, well, she doesn't know, but I found out that she likes to do the New York Times crossword every day, and so do I. And she pulled a copy of that day's crossword, a photocopy, out of her purse and handed to me. And she said, "I always carry a photocopy for anyone who maybe wants to do it. I'm like, oh my gosh, got time to kill and I didn't get a chance to do it. So we got along really well. And I think it was just her and Ty that I pretty much had conversations with. But it was very, very cool to just kind of say congratulations on your gig as an actor. I mean, he said, thanks. Yeah, I said, because it's pretty sweet. This is really series television is what every actor ultimately wants to end up in, because they have a family, they have a home, they want to go to work and then just come back each day instead of being on location somewhere for 6 months. So if you have an 8 to 9 month long job, then you have 3 or 4 months off. That's like a regular gig, except you're making millions of dollars and, putting it away and having retirement. And it's just, when people go to work on those shows, they're at work and they work as a family. They all love each other. It's cool.
Is it hard to deal with that fluidity as an actor when many actors aren't in that just sort of tight-knit series role?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Very insightful. It is. It can be. I think that's one of the barricades that you kind of bump into in terms of being your best. And let me explain that. The Dunphys and and Jay and all the, they're all working together day after day, year after year. There's such a chemistry and camaraderie that they kind of are in their bubble. And then these guest stars and co-stars come in every episode. And so not only the cast, but the whole crew, they're all a big bubble family. And if you can't manage to, for one day, or I worked on an NCIS episode for like 8 days or something, if you can't manage to pop and burst into that bubble, it can affect your performance. Because someone like me, who's pretty seasoned professional, but still, if I don't break in there somehow and feel comfortable, then if I'm not comfortable, I'm not very good at what I do, because I have to just be so chill and calm and comfortable that everything just feels so natural and easy and it works great. But I've been in certain situations where I haven't felt as comfortable as I could be. And I think it's because every actor that steps onto one of those sets, they don't know the director, they don't know the DP, they don't know everyone yet. They've met them, but there isn't a familiarity and comfort zone. When I was doing Granite Flats, that's how it was. We were all a family. So I never felt uncomfortable. We'd step on the set, we'd laugh, we'd talk, everyone was joking, and then action, and you're there and you're doing it, and you're not nervous or scared because you know Annie Tedesco, and you know Peter Murnick, or you know Christopher Lloyd. I mean, you've met them, you've talked to them. But yeah, Modern Family was a little like that. The director and everyone else, they had a huge crew. They just make so much money. They've just got somebody for everything. And I didn't even know which one was the director. I came on, I only had like 3 lines. They actually gave one of my lines to Claire. When I did it in the audition, it was my line. But the guy said, you made it funny, so we gave it to Claire so she could. And it was this, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's this line where she said, they come from Cuba or something, these cigars. And that was me doing that. And so she took it. And I'm like, but the director was just sitting way back in the little video village, they call it. And I didn't even, we're all sitting at the table, and I hate it when actors don't eat their food. Like, let's actually eat. That's more authentic. No one is eating, so I'm sitting there eating, and they go, cut. And all I hear is a voice, and the guy goes, Scott, why are you eating? Well, yeah, but you're supposed to be done so that you guys can go out and smoke those cigars that Claire brought from blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, noted. And I never saw him. Don't even know who the director was.
That's so frustrating, because when I watch like The Big Bang Theory and stuff, I'm sitting there and I'm like, just eat the food. Stop playing with the food. Just eat it.
And the reason they don't is because obviously if you're doing a lot of takes, you can't eat that much food. It makes you sick. There's continuity issues. Well, when I said my line was I putting it in my mouth right on that one so that when they turn the camera around, you got to match it. And it's just like, I'd rather take the time and figure out every time I take a bite when it's going to be and just match it, because people eating in a show, it's way more natural. Yeah, could you hand me that? Drinking, eating, but it's always just a pretty table with all the food, and maybe they have their forks in their hands, but they never actually. I did this NCIS episode. It starts with a guy bringing me a cup of coffee, and I was literally gonna, or it was Coke, but I was gonna take a sip before my first line, and the director said, "No, let's just get to it." So in comes the guy, here you go. And I even say, "Thank you." And I set it down, and then I put my hands back down and don't touch it. And I'm like, it looks so stupid to me. Why would I say thank you and not go, So you really think she was murdered because of, or whatever? Anyway.
You wrote the book, The Levity Effect, and it's a fantastic book, and it's a concept that when I started following you on LinkedIn, I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I was studying marketing at the time and business, and so was interested in these sort of cultural things in business. And what motivated you to write about levity, and what to you is levity? How would you define it?
Well, I define it recently, in the last 10, 12 years, for my presentations as latitude, attitude, and gratitude. Those are kind of the three. They're rhyming, and it's real cute. They lag. Latitude, attitude, gratitude. But honestly, for me, levity is the opposite of gravitas. It's lightening things up, keeping things more authentic and real. And the reason that I wanted to, it's not so much humor and laughter and jocularity, although that's a big part of it. But the impetus behind it was I had finally, once again, taken a regular job at a company. And so I was the manager of training or something at the time. And my bosses had already written and published a couple of books about being better leaders and kind of more about employee recognition and gratitude and appreciation and things like that. And I was so amazed after the first month of working that how serious everyone was. It was almost debilitating. It was like, boy, is this what business is? This is just, everyone's just so furrow-browed and clenched-jawed all the time. I mean, really, is someone going to die on our watch? We're a business services company. It's not rocket surgery, if you will. And so I went into my boss and I said, I really think we could add to our collection of services, of training services, of leadership services, with this idea of lightening up, of having a sense of humor, or at least bringing your sense of humor from home to the work, a more holistic approach to being a person instead of compartmentalizing work, home, church, blah, blah. We're just all who we are. And so I said, but primarily it was motivated by things are just way too serious around here. I know that you are a fun, loving, funny person away from work. Why aren't you that here? What is it about that makes work, that would wreck work for you? If anything, it's going to make it better. So that was kind of it, me going to him and just pitching it. And his name's Adrian Gostick, and he's written a bunch of books before and since, but I knew that he was a published author who had already sold some bestsellers. And I said, do you want to team up with me on this? And so we did it apart from our jobs. Our CEO, Kent Murdoch, who was a mission president in France and just an amazing man, he said, yeah, it doesn't sound like it competes with what we do. And we were lucky enough to find a great publisher and go for it. And then after a little while, Adrian said, okay, it's all yours. Once it was published, and he got his money, and I got him. So I've been the levity guy since 2008. And Adrian, though his name is still on the book cover, has never really been a part of it at all, except maybe as a consultant, because we're still very close friends.
And you wrote another book called The 7 Ups of Happiness, and I was interested that one of those that you chose was Lighten Up. So there is this sort of, what was there, with the research that was done behind the Levity Effect book, were there any statistics that surprised you or stood out to you in terms of how this would impact this attitude of levity, how it would impact happiness and the sort of fruits of it?
No, there was. I mean, I wish at this moment I could actually cite some of the statistics. It's been a while since we did the research and wrote the book, but nothing was surprising. That's what was cool about it, was that it was all very validating to our hypotheses. I mean, it was like, oh, this is exactly what we expected. This was what we felt intuitively. And now there are these organizations and these companies and all of these case studies of, these very serious organizations like a hospital, who says, oh, we've got to be serious. This is all implicit. This is life and death. But the food services department, they're not doctors, they're not nurses. But if their patient satisfaction with food service and quality is the worst in the U.S., then they feel like they have some room to experiment with changing up the mood and the tone. And so they applied levity in their organization within their food department in a very serious hospital. Their manager said, I want you to laugh. I want you to tell jokes. I want to do dress-up days. I want to have parties. Let's try this and just see what happens. And they went from the worst, they were in the first percentile nationally for satisfaction among patients and their guests, to the 99th percentile in 6 months.
Wow.
So just encouraging people to be themselves, to have more fun, to mess with the patients, to tell the jokes, and also to thank. Thanking was a big part of it. Appreciation is a huge part of lightening up. That's why latitude, attitude, and gratitude. Nowhere in there do you have learn to tell a bunch of funny knock-knock jokes or whatever. It's not so much about the humor. That's an added benefit. If you can do it, great. Most people can't. It's more about just a lighter attitude where you're not running to HR every time someone says something that someone else, not even you, might feel is somewhat off color. That always kills me when people are offended for someone else, and then the supposed object of derision says, relax, I'm not offended. This isn't offensive to me. We're just people. So while the book isn't rife with that attitude that I'm giving you, the author is. I had to tone it down. For the 7 Ups of Happiness, I bring a little more attitude to it. But yeah, there's definitely a correlation scientifically between lightening up and having a happier life, both in the short term and the long term.
What did you learn about that from when you visited a Namibian tribe?
Gal, you have done your homework. I learned some of the neatest things on that trip down to Namibia and South Africa and some other places where it really just doesn't matter what material possessions you have, how dire or just outright sad circumstances appear to outsiders. You can laugh and smile and enjoy life. If you saw the video that, of the young man in the wheelchair, there was this guy who had, I can't remember what he told me, how he lost his leg, or legs. I think maybe it was just one leg, but he and his sister live in these little mud huts. You know what I mean? Oh gosh. And he wheels around on this rocky, craggy thing. We were there to give them a water tank system that catches rainwater, and then they can have fresh water. Otherwise, they're walking 5 miles a day each way to go get water for hygiene and other things and drinking. But they were so happy to have it and so grateful and kind. And I said, where do you want to go? Do you want to live somewhere else? And he's like, no, this is our home. We're good. We just needed to drink and have showers now and then, So, there's perspective. Get out in the world, meet some other people, and you'll quickly gain some perspective on lightening up.
And this is with this being a faith-based podcast, I think that example really shows how it applies to the rest of our life. But I think there are a few, when I was preparing for us talking, I was thinking, how can levity apply to faith? Because sometimes when we apply levity, it can come off as, oh, well, he's just not very serious about this. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I've been thinking about that. How can it enhance and improve our faith and our discipleship?
Right. It's a great question. And my brother and I have these conversations a lot because he and I are really cut from the same cloth in that way, where our greatest challenge is to not be judgmental because someone has a different personality than ours. Sometimes it's a temptation for us to go, oh, this guy at the pulpit, I mean, doesn't he know how boring he is? Doesn't he know that he's got to kind of change up the tone of his voice and keep it interesting? But then in that very moment, the Spirit chides you because if the man has the Spirit with him and he qualifies for it and he's speaking truths, the Spirit will keep you entertained. The Spirit will keep you happy. Now, having said that, for me, the gospel is joy. It's the most joyous thing. It's the good news, right? And there's myriad times when we are commanded to be of good cheer, to lift up your head and be of good cheer. Maybe it's not us, but through the experiences of the Nephites or the Lamanites or the Israelites, it comes to us. And it's said to one is said to all, be of good cheer. And for many people, that is lightening up. Like in their hearts, they're not cheerful, and it's expressed on their face. It's not serving anyone at church. It's not serving anyone anywhere to have that demeanor. It's similar to when thou fastest, washest thou thy face, and don't appear to the people to be fasting of a sad countenance. You have your reward. Just be happy. In other words, be happy. You can choose happiness. And the more you choose it, the more likely you are to choose and make the decisions that will bring more longer-term consequences of happiness. Because there's that short-term and there's long-term. And sometimes we just need an instant upper. We need something that makes us happy right now. But over the long term, we need a series of things, a pattern, a routine of things that make us happy. You, of course, know what I'm talking about. And that's why I say that's the connection to the gospel. There's something about shared laughter that's very unifying. It's very, it brings people together, harmony, you know what I mean? And so there is inappropriateness, no question about it. And you can spot it right away. Like humor for humor's sake. And I'm saying this in a church perspective. Teaching a lesson is not a stand-up comedy routine. Giving a talk is not an opportunity to try out jokes. For me, those things are just born of my personality while I'm in the Spirit. And so people will go, I loved your class. We listened, we learned, and yet, we laughed too. And I always figure if they're laughing, they're listening. But I don't go out on purpose saying, I'm going to make you laugh. Oh no, I don't want to be condemned. I'm here to tell you what the Spirit needs me to tell you. And if in my way of doing that, it comes out with a little bit of humor or none at all, whatever. I'm just, you know what I mean? So There's a very strong connection to
And
me.
it sounds like it's a very active thing as well. And it's a conscious decision almost. You know, you use the term apply levity, like this company applied levity. And we should, I think sometimes when I'm at church on a Sunday and everyone's sort of newly woken up for the day, and the opening hymn is something like, "There is sunshine in my soul today," and everyone's sort of whispering it with a dead face, "There is sunshine," like rote. And I think of one of my favorite scriptures, "The Lord loveth a cheerful giver and is able to make all grace abound toward them." And I think there's real, obviously I believe it's true, but I think there's real power in that if we choose to be a cheerful giver, if we choose to really let the gospel fill us with joy, that grace, we will feel it, and will feel very powerful as well.
I love that. I do. For me, when we talk about faith, hope, and charity, sometimes faith and hope, seem to intertwine a little bit to the extent that even from just a definition standard basis, we kind of go, faith and hope kind of seem the same to some degree. We know there's differences, but for me, the way that I separate it is, hope is, for me, the physical manifestation, or one of the physical manifestations of having faith. So for me, hope is the smile on the face. It's the song in the heart. It's the playfulness and just trying to keep things up. It's making a pathway bright, for getting the sunshine in you put it there. Hope is, to me, manifest visually. I want the Lord to see me acting, even if, fake it till you make it, acting as though everything is going to be all right. It's in his hands. I just have to delight in my covenants and go to work each day and be positive and show it. Because what kind of a light am I being to the world if my candle is out? A light unto the world, or a city that is set on a hill, or, I love the salt of the earth. That's my favorite. The salt of the earth to me is levity. What is salt? It is flavor. It takes bland and it gives it flavor. Now, I know that biblically they talk about it preserving things. I like to look at it as the salt of food, the salt of the diet. We, as covenant makers and keepers, are the salt of the earth. We need to flavor our interactions and flavor society. Why? Not for the applause, not for the gain of respect and notoriety, but because it draws attention to the Savior. It draws attention to the church. Why are you so salty? Why are you so happy? What is it that's different about you? In this world, how can you possibly stand to whistle happily and have fun and be light? Well, let me tell you why. On a more serious note, X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? We have to be the salt of the earth. Otherwise, what good are we but to be trodden underfoot of men? Oh, great. So no one will slip and fall on their ice. I don't want to be that salt. There's
a scripture in Habakkuk. I always, just in case, I bring my scriptures with.
Nice.
He's quoting a psalm at the end of his. He writes like this short. Habakkuk's only 3 chapters, but the very last verse he quotes a psalm, and I prefer it in Habakkuk because of the context, and he's having a hard time. But then in verse 19 he says, "The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet, and he will make me to walk upon mine high places." But I love that. He will make my feet like hinds' feet, and I envisage those green pastures and just hopping along nicely. And I think that is one of the true gifts of the gospel, is that ability to apply levity in any situation, to be the one. And I don't mean this in a sort of jokey way, but to be the one at a funeral or in a dark time that, because of the hope and gospel, doesn't, how do I articulate that? brings everyone
No,
together,
I know
you
what
know?
yeah, I do. I was going to even mention a funeral as an example of, one of the most dreadfully serious situations and places that you can imagine yourself. I don't even want to go to the funeral. It's so uncomfortable. Why does it have to be uncomfortable? Well, depending on the nature of the death of the person, obviously, you know, it's give and take in terms of the levity. But let's face it, the best funerals we've ever attended have had laughter at the pulpit in happily remembering their loved ones that have gone on. The joking, the remembrances, all of that. It raises the spirits. The people feel more consoled. It's not so grief-filled. Even where it is a tragic ending, there's always a way to lighten things up and raise a spirit. The opposite of that is where Satan wants us. We've heard a million times his goal is for us to be miserable like he is. Think of all the places you can be miserable, all the reasons that you can have misery. The Savior never once says, I would that ye should be miserable. I don't recall that anywhere. He's always saying, have joy, be happy, cheer up. And he, as well as anyone, knows that that's going to include funerals and tragedies and war and famine and health challenges and unemployment. But he does not want us to be miserable. Well, if you don't want us to be miserable, then why are you putting us through blah, blah, blah? I'm putting you through, even though I'm not really putting you through those things, to see if you will still have joy and be happy, and then learn and grow as you go forward. And so, well, it's not easy. I mean, we're definitely talking theory here. A lot of people that I know, myself included, practice that as best as we possibly can. And it sometimes, to some of the more moderate saints, it may come off as, man, he's obnoxious, or did he just say that? But I promise you, I don't say anything in a church meeting or in a lesson that is contrary to the doctrine of the gospel, nor is it even contrary openly to someone else's comment. I'm not vindictive or combative. You know what I mean? But raise the game a little. Let's all talk. My brother the other day, I'm sorry I'm going on, but he said, he's an elders quorum president. He said, I always try to get the guys in my quorum to greet people, to say hello, to reach out, to do more. And some of them will go, well, that's just not my personality. That's not how I am. There's no excuse for what your personality is. We're not trying to change you. Jesus, for all we know, may have been the most demure, timid, shy person ever. But did he ever not greet someone? Did he ever walk past someone sitting there looking sad and went, that's scary. I don't want to reach out and say hello to him. That's out of my comfort zone. Look, he gives us commandments so that we fulfill them. It doesn't matter if, well, naturally, I just feel compelled to steal. So I'm not going to keep the commandment, thou shalt not steal, because it's just sort of who I am. It's how I am. Now, I know I'm taking this to an extreme, but my point is that your personality, your natural personality is yours. But there are moments when you can lighten the heck up and just have a little bit of more joy in your face, in your countenance, in your tone of voice, in how you greet and talk to people. Those things matter. And if nothing else, do them out of service to others. Forget yourself and serve them by smiling, by laughing, by talking.
Thank you for that. I feel inspired. I think of the visual of Christ promising us to ease our burdens, almost like you have this really heavy backpack and you take it off, and that feeling of like, and I feel like when we remember that and truly remember that we can apply that principle of levity across the board. And I think that also gives us the measuring stick of appropriateness as well.
Well, why did people, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but why did people revere Gordon Bittner Hinckley so much as the leader of this church? Like other prophets, he brought a lot of things experience, wisdom, but he had a twinkle in his eye. He had a sense of humor that he sometimes unleashed even at the pulpit in conference. There was always there was an underlying sense of just reality and humor that President Hinckley had. I mean, I remember sitting in conference and people belly laughing. And these weren't even pre-prepared written jokes. This was just him riffing, based on what was just happening. I mean, Hinckley was fantastic in that way. Now, that was his personality. Maybe it's not Nelson's, maybe it wasn't Monson's, but it was his, and there was nothing out of comfort or propriety. It was all joyful humor. We always shy away from loud laughter. What is that? What does that mean? What's going to happen? If you have the president and prophet of God at the pulpit having the good time, it's not 90% of what he did, but it was there. I think we get a pretty good understanding of what loud laughter isn't.
Yeah, definitely. And to conclude this, I've had such a great time, but what would you hope that someone listening would take away from your message of applying levity?
Well, I would say my main thing would be just, be who you are, because for a lot of people, again, equating levity with lightening up is to not be afraid of who and how you are. Having said that, the most important part of being who you are is that you understand that it aligns with what Heavenly Father wants you to be, that He knows who you are, really. Having that divine identity and understanding who you really are, and not just a child of God, but you're a unique child of God. It's easy to say I'm one of the children of God, but we're not all the same. No one anywhere is exactly alike. So the gospel, the covenants, the commandments, they all must be followed and obeyed according to the Spirit. And without the Spirit, it's difficult to understand the spirit of the law. So when people hide behind, well, it's the spirit of the law, so I'm just not going to do this or I'm going to do that, they can really only make that claim if they have the Spirit. Too many people make the spirit of the law claim and they're way off. So find your center, find out who you are, and then align it with God's will and live each day the best that you can, trying to do what He would have you do that day, not tomorrow and not yesterday, but that day only. What do you want me to do and be? And if it includes levity, however you define it, great. If it doesn't, no failure.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for speaking with me today. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to it for a while, and so grateful that you would give up some time to speak to me.
Oh, my pleasure, Ben. Thanks for asking. Really, it's always great to be a part of these kinds of shows. And I've got some piano exercises I've got to run through here. Yeah, that's starting up pretty quickly. And then I'm going to head out my big oak door there and go for a boat ride on my yacht. So
I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Ben. You too. Good luck with the editing.
Thank you. See you later. Thanks for watching For All the Saints. This show needs your help to grow. Please like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you think would enjoy it. Thank you.